Hello, and once again, welcome to Nattabox, where we talk to inspirational people and try and bring you some kind of positivity from individuals who have done really well, whether it's in the world of business, music, sports, health and well-being, and just to share their stories and experiences, and hopefully that people can kind of learn and grow from along the way. So it is now time for episode 2. It's very exciting, and my guest for today is someone that I've known for many, many years now, and he is one of the most intelligent people that I know, and he hasn't paid me to say that either, but one of the most intelligent people I know. But when it comes to health and well-being and looking after yourself, then he has been an absolute rock for me and my go-to at points when my dad hasn't been well. So it is the one and only fabulous Dr. Dorian Dugmore.
Wow, that was some build-up, that was, wasn't it?
I do try. How are you?
No, I'm very good. I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming on to Nattabox.
Oh, that's my pleasure.
Looks a bit different since the last time you were here.
It certainly does. It's very, very posh, isn't it? It really is. Yeah,
You know,
very,
make
very
an effort
posh.
for you and everything.
And I want to know about the cup. Where you've got your
So-
own photo on the cup.
That sounds really bad. It's not in an egotistical way, by the way. So I went to jail. I did. I went to jail. So if you can see here we have a mug, but it was for charity, basically. So I went to jail for the Midlands Air Ambulance. And see, my sentence will help save a life. Midlands Air Ambulance charity, jail or bail 2023, although I'm definitely not nearly 6 foot, I know that much. But yes, they, as part of raising some money for them, great charity, one of my favourites. Then, yeah, I had to spend the night along with some other wonderful individuals in, I think it's the world's second most haunted prison in the world. And yes, I do believe in ghosts. But yes, I was rather uncomfortable on the evening, but it was in Shrewsbury Prison.
Wow, and they didn't keep you in.
No, very funny. No, my dad said when he dropped me off, he said, make sure they lose the key so you don't have to say too soon. But that's
sure
a
he
story for
didn't.
another day.
I'm sure he didn't.
But anyway, we're not here to talk about me. We are here to talk about you. And as you've just heard from my introduction, you are an incredible man in terms of a lot of the people that you've helped along the way. So just to sort of specify, as a doctor, you're not someone who physically goes in, scrubs it up, gets the gloves on and goes in and does hands-on surgery. But can you tell us more about what it is that you actually do?
Yeah, I'm a PhD in cardiovascular medicine, so my speciality really is rehabilitating people after heart problems. So we formed a charity in this region, actually, in the West Midlands, called Action Heart, which was groundbreaking in terms of getting people fit and healthy after heart problems. At the time, and this was years ago now, at the time, the standard procedure for looking after somebody who'd had a heart problem was to put them to bed for 6 or 8 weeks and, suggest they didn't move very much. And actually, the problems associated with that were worse than the heart attack in the first place in many
Right.
instances. And so I was approached by a very famous cardiologist in this region at the time, a Czechoslovakian cardiologist called Michael Kubik. And I'd written some articles in the press about sudden death related to the game of squash.
Wow, okay.
And he approached me and had read the article and said, really interesting, could we meet? Would you be interested in starting an exercise program, a cardiac rehabilitation program for heart patients? It's never been done in this country to any degree. And that's how it all started, really. And so we formed a charity that initially was termed the Exercise Rehabilitation Association. It then became Action Heart.
Okay.
And we've now rehabilitated thousands and thousands of patients. I've moved on from there now, taken many of the messages that we had from getting people fit and healthy after heart problems and literally putting the cart before the horse and preventing rather than treating. And
Right.
so, it's gone full circle, really. And so that's a quick synopsis of how I became involved in hearts. When I was in the hospital setting, I'd already been to America, got a master's degree in exercise physiology and health and well-being, and There were no titles for people to work in the health service for people with my qualification. I've been to America to get that qualification, and
Mm.
so I actually trained and masqueraded as a coronary care nurse for a period of time to learn the business.
Well, okay.
And then, as a result of that, we formed, a program that looked after rehabilitating heart patients, and that's how it all began. My sort of interest in hearts. The other reason I was passionate about hearts was that as a potential professional footballer,
Right.
I was misdiagnosed with a heart problem.
This was going to be my next question to you, because obviously the background that you've got, and as you've said, you've gone on to change thousands of lives, albeit for the better. But what actually got you into that in the first place? How did you think, oh right, do you know what, I want to specialize in the heart?
Yeah, I came back from America with a master's degree, and I was one of a handful of people with master's degrees in exercise physiology, exercise medicine, and health and well-being. And I went back to my alma mater, my college where I trained, which you
Mhm.
know very well, the Walsall
Indeed,
campus.
yes.
Then it was West Midlands College of Education, and I came back to see the professor
Mm.
who had encouraged me and helped me get a scholarship to go to the States and study. And as I walked into one of his lectures, he said, "Oh, cracky, this is a really, really fit guy. He's a serious footballer. He's played at a high level, and it'd be great if we can test him."
Well, can you
And
tell us about that in terms of before we even get to the testing? Because you were a professional sports person.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I was tracked as a schoolboy to play for a number of teams in the West Midlands region, and I had to put a hold on that to go to America and study. And so, yeah, the background of that was I was coming back to sign a contract,
Hmm.
and that was the sort of dream. And then when I walked into the college, I was tested in front of all of these students, and they found something that was strange in my electrocardiogram. Electrocardiogram is looking at your ECG.
Yep.
Um, and so he said, "We better follow through with that." And they stopped the test. And of course, I was shell shocked at the time. And I thought, wow, I've never had anything wrong with my heart because
You would have been about what age at this point?
21.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So um, I then went to a specialist, a very old fashioned cardiologist in the Birmingham area, and he didn't have any sympathy at all for potential professional sportsmen, and asked me what I was. And when I told him what I was and that my goal was to be a professional footballer, he said, "Well, I'm afraid looking at all your results, there's something wrong with your heart, and you'll have to get a proper job." So that's how he told me, and of course I was shell
Devastated.
shocked, devastated, went home, didn't go out of the house for a week, and I thought, this can't be right.
Mm.
Cut a long story short, 3 months later, I went back for a reassessment. All of the signs had gone and improved. It suggested it was a viral infection of my heart that had cleared up because I'd had a very bad flu
Right.
before, going to see the specialist. And the way in which I was treated at the time was so upsetting
Mm.
that I decided if I could ever help people's hearts, I would. And that was
And
the
that's what put you on this
instigation.
path.
Yeah, that's what put me
So
on the
literally at
path.
that point when they've turned around and said, "Nope, sorry, you've got a heart problem. You can't play professional sports." In your mind, that was the end of it. So when it was sort of 3 months later and it transpired that actually you're okay, was there not that option at that stage to think, actually, well, let me just pick up where I left off and go back to continuing my sort of my professional playing career
Yeah,
dream?
there was, and I did, and I got into coaching, and I became a fully qualified, full badge licensed coach. Which, when you get there's very at that time there were very few of people like that around, and you get a license to coach, and inside the license it says this gentleman is qualified to coach the game of football at any level, including World Cup level. And
Okay.
so I became, on the back of that, I became a coach to the Great Britain squad for football. And so
And you went overseas at one stage as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I went overseas. I played and coached overseas, and then I coached.
And that was where, Canada?
It was in Canada and also
You're being very
America.
humble here, Dorian. You don't need to be humble here. You can shout about your accolades
No,
because
no.
there's many.
Yeah. Yeah, and then ended up sort of coaching the World Student Games side. So, Kobe, Japan, Zagreb, Yugoslavia, Sao Paulo, Brazil. I was appointed to coach there, although that was eventually cancelled. Sheffield in the United Kingdom. Although, just before the games in Sheffield, I got offered probably the top job in the world at the time, leading the world famous Toronto Rehabilitation Centre that could have up to 2,000 patients a week who all just had heart problems,
Yeah.
and sort of looking at their health and well-being and helping them rehabilitate. So, the whole journey from sport to cardiac rehabilitation to doing a PhD in cardiovascular medicine came as a result of all of those things that had happened in the background. And actually, it's a very, very famous moment in my career, relating to a former England manager, Howard Wilkinson.
Okay, yeah.
And I was actually coaching a side. It was a national side that played an FA side, and Howard was the coach of the FA side, and I was the coach of another sort of celebrity side, and we did very, very well. I ended up playing, and Howard actually qualified me as a full badge coach. But I came off the pitch on one occasion, and Howard put his arm around me, and I'd had a particularly awful game. Not really, but
It happens to the best of them,
happens.
Dorian.
I came off, and he put his arm around me, and I actually scored a couple of goals. And he said, "Dorian," he said, "Oh, you were crap." And I said, "I know, Howard." And he's pulling my leg, and he put his arm around me, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "You can't keep playing football, coaching football at this sort of level, doing your PhD in cardiovascular medicine. You're going to have to make some choices." And he was pulling my leg, but that was a turning moment in my life.
Really?
Yeah, because I listened and I thought, and I walked away from, it was at Lillishall,
Yes.
and I walked away from, which then was a national centre
Yeah,
for
that's where
coaching
my uncle used to.
football.
My dad used to take me down there when we go and see
Yeah,
Uncle Brendan. So yeah.
Yeah, so I walked away from there, and I thought, you know what? Although he was joking, there's a serious moment there that I need to reflect on. And so I chose to go down the route of cardiovascular medicine, cardiac rehabilitation, and that was a turning moment. And, fast track, long story short, I ended up some years later looking after all the Premiership managers, Howard being one of them, because he was a former England manager and Leeds
He
United.
must have remembered you as well. Was that a moment when you sort of had that reconnection?
Absolutely, yeah, and of course he remembered me, and we became great friends, and I actually look after Howard to this day in terms of cardiovascular health, and I've looked after many football managers, a lot from the Premiership. So things come full circle, don't they?
And everything for a reason, as they say. I mean, did you, when you made that conscious decision to go from playing and coaching to concentrating on the cardiovascular side, is it something that you missed, or did you feel at that stage that, you know what, I think this is my calling?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I did think it was my calling, and the biggest thing that really turned me towards that was the fact that I love helping people, and I get a real pleasure out of seeing people who are facing what they think is the end in terms of their careers and in terms of their health and well-being, and watching them turn around, away from that and come back and actually be even healthier and fitter than they were before. There's a couple of very famous cases. One was a guy called Norman Clements, who worked I think in the steelworks in the West Midlands, and he was told by his cardiologist and doctor that he would never sort of work again, that he could move his bed downstairs and get used on a good day for a walk in the back garden. And Norman came to me and said, "I've heard you've set up this cardiac rehabilitation program. Can you help me?" And cut a long story short, Norman ended up running the London Marathon 3 times
Wow.
under 5 hours in his late 50s, early 60s, and was voted one of the runners of the year by Running Magazine. And that was pretty amazing considering only a few years
Complete.
earlier
Yeah.
he was told he was finished. And that sort of thing, you can't put into words the buzz that that gives somebody.
Why do you think that is then, in terms of not writing people off when it comes to the heart? Is it just that medicine has come such a long way um, since the early days, or I don't really know how to sort of explain it. Why do people have that kind of mentality that, oh no, that's it then? If the heart's at that stage, it's not possible to reverse the damage that's already been done, because you are sort of one, especially some of the things you've told me in the past are a testament to say no, that it's never too late to get yourself back on track.
No, that's right. I mean, obviously, anything wrong with the heart's very, very, very serious because it's the center of your life. Really, it pumps blood around the body 24/7. It's a pump that is the pump of life, really. And if there's something wrong with it, then A, it's life threatening, and B, it's devastating for the person who suffers from the heart problem. And you're right, medicine has come on, amazingly over the last sort of 20, 30 years. And now the ability of the heart to recover is augmented by fantastic improvements in coronary artery surgery, in heart surgery, in heart
Mm.
rehabilitation, in managing the risks that are associated with a heart problem. So, the whole thing, has improved, dramatically, and so it can make a big difference to a person's potential for life in the future. And it's not the end of the world as many people very often think it is. And when you look at somebody who suffered a heart problem, it's devastating,
Yeah.
and because they're worried. I mean, they're worried about what they can do, what they can't do. It's not just about them either. It's about the people that surround them. It's the families that support them. I mean, you know
Firsthand,
all
yeah.
about that firsthand because of your own family challenges, and so trying to help people improve and realize what they can and do, and what they can't do
Hmm.
is
Squash, you
really.
mentioned squash. Even to this day, Dad says, no, I'm going to go. We were like, Dad, you're not playing squash.
No, that's right. Well, there's a very famous piece of research 20, 30 years ago by two very famous cardiologists at the time, David Ballantyne and Robin Northcote, and they produced a paper that I think was published in one of the British Heart journals, and it was on sudden death in relation to the game of squash. And I think they studied 69, 70 people that had died suddenly in relation to the game of squash. An
This is
inch.
over and above any other sports.
Well, other sports have had problems. I mean, you've only got to look at football recently,
Yeah.
and some famous names like Christian Eriksen, and
Yeah.
a number of people have had problems for different reasons. But the squash one was fascinating. 14 of the people, they all died. 14 of them died in the locker room, believe it or not, with a lighted cigarette. Can you
Really?
believe that? So when they came off the squash court, they go straight into the locker room, sit down on the bench.
Mm.
In the case of the 14 I mentioned, light up a cigarette. What they don't realize is that probably 33 and a third percent of your total blood volume is in your legs. So if you suddenly have been exercising
Right.
intensively, like in a game of squash,
Yeah.
then you come and sit down on a bench straight after, what are you doing? You're knocking out the potential of your blood to return to your right heart and then go to the lungs, pick up fresh oxygen and get recirculated, come back to the left heart and get recirculated. So it's a traumatized event if you suddenly stop exercise after the intensity
Mm.
of something like the game of squash. And then some of the people that played squash at the time,
Yeah.
it was relatively new to this country. Not new, but it wasn't really the sort of well-known sport that it is
Yeah.
now. the people would go and play that, and they maybe hadn't exercised for 10 and 20 years, and then they go into a squash court and
High
kid
intensity.
themselves that they're getting fit. High intensity exercise can be very dangerous. And so the message I had in the stuff that I wrote at the time was you should get fit to play squash,
Mm.
not play squash
To
to
get
get
fit.
fit.
I think that's in terms of because we had Mom on for the first episode last week, and Dad's sort of in the background. And I mentioned at the time that obviously he had his heart failure, he had atrial fibrillation, he had an enlarged heart, all sorts of things. But I actually think it was when he went to play a game of squash with one of his mates. And my dad used to be fit as a fiddle, used to play semi-pro football, all that kind of stuff. And it was off the back of a game of squash that even he was thinking, flipping out. In comparison, I thought I used to be fit, but that's when he noticed that I think there was something wrong with his breathing, and it was off a game of squash.
Yeah, I
That's when
mean,
it all started to come to fruition.
yeah. I mean, your heart's controlled electrically. It's like a telephone system down the septums or the center partitions of the heart. And when your heart is in trouble, very often it disturbs the electrical control of your heart, and that can cause problems. And atrial fibrillation is one of those problems. It
Mm.
is when you've got a very, very rapid heart rate that almost sends the heart haywire out of control, and that can be a dangerous issue. And unfortunately, as people get older, the appearance of atrial fibrillation can very often increase. It's also, we don't know why, but it's also quite common in some athletic populations. And of course, when the electrics go haywire, that can cause a shock to the heart.
Mm.
And that's when, places now should have cardiac defibrillators within easy reach of the public and certainly in sporting environments, absolutely critical.
Well, wasn't it off when Fabrice Muamba that game? Wasn't it him who actually petitioned to make sure that there was a cardiac kit in every shopping mall across the country? I'm sure that there was something that he did a lot to make sure that they were much more accessible and
Yeah,
available than what they had been
yeah.
previously.
Fabrice Moamba collapsed on the
It was
pitch.
horrible to watch as well. I still remember seeing
I
it.
think it's the Bolton player at the time, wasn't he? I can't. I think so. Yeah,
Was it Bolton or Spurs? I
it
can't
was,
remember one of the
I
two.
think it was the Bolton Spurs game,
Right, okay.
maybe. Yeah, that's right. And luckily, I believe, and this is second hand, but I believe there are a couple of cardiologists in the crowd that
Isn't
recognised
that
what had
what's
happened,
yeah.
and it's amazing. And in fact, incidents like that. At the time I was involved and I'm still linked with them, the nucleus in sport cardiology for Europe. And we looked at that whole challenge, and we did a special study. Myself, the Real Madrid doctor Luis Saratosa, and the Swedish under 21 doctor Mats Barson, and we looked at the provision of cardiac defibrillators in all the major football clubs across Europe, 10 countries, including most of the Champions League clubs.
Yeah.
And we found nearly up to 38% of them didn't even have a cardiac defibrillator in the ground.
Really?
And the ones that had problems were at least 20 minutes from the nearest hospital. And
Which is,
so,
you would think that that's absurd, especially the kind of money that is available now to a lot of these clubs and the facilities that they've got. Um, yeah, that's very surprising.
so we did a study, and we surveyed, loads and loads of these football clubs, published the results, and that was the reason, or one of the influential reasons why, UEFA and FIFA now insist that cardiac defibrillators should be in football stadiums. It was the football stadium study; it became very famous,
Right.
and so that was a chance to sort of bring my connection to football back to cardiovascular
Yeah.
medicine and make a real difference, really. And so it's funny how things go full circle, isn't it? Really.
Well, I mean, the other thing as well is I think to highlight on age, because I think a lot of people would automatically think if you're going to have a heart attack or you're going to have some kind of heart issues, that it's people who are elderly. But we're talking about young, fit athletes, and not just even people who are athletes. You've got youngsters who might have certain conditions that are in their teens perhaps. So when it comes to those kind of individuals, is there some kind of like a genetic connection there in terms of sort of family history? Is there something that can be carried through the generations?
Yeah, there can be. I mean, genetics and hereditary characteristics are big markers that can reflect, increased risk in generations that follow. You're absolutely right. But also, people can be born with congenital abnormalities of their heart. I mean, there's a whole series of things that can influence it. And so it's a case really of getting a profile. And one of the things we do corporately now, we've been very successful at building corporate wellness programs, preventative programs. We just am I okay to mention the latest study that we
Go for
did?
your life, yeah.
We just did a major program for Lancashire County FA. Well, Lancashire County, there are, I think, 18 major county FAs in the country, and I think Lancashire is the biggest one.
Right.
And so there are hundreds and hundreds of football clubs, including all the big clubs,
Yeah.
your Liverpools and Evertons of this world. And so we did a study looking after the employees that belong to Lancashire County FA. And we went into the County FA and measured all of the key cardiovascular and lifestyle risk factors of the employees.
This isn't just we're not talking about the players now. We're talking
No,
about the
we talk
general staff behind the scenes,
correct.
kit
Yeah.
men, all that kind of stuff,
Well,
admin.
admin,
Yeah.
yeah, all the people, people that manage the referees, a whole series of people that were the employees of Lancashire
Okay.
County FA, and they've got some beautiful offices in Leyland. Um, and so we developed their program, and luckily for us, we looked at their risk, we looked at their lifestyles, we looked at how we could impact those lifestyles and help them. And it's just one best British wellness workplace program in the country. So
Congratulations.
thank you very much. It wasn't just me. It was
It was a
it
team
was
effort.
my team and the people that work with me. But more importantly, it was the CEO of Lancs FA, Simon Gerrard, who's a very forward-looking leader,
Hmm.
cares tremendously about his people, and and that's a new theme, really. People are now beginning to realise in the corporate world that it's about your people.
Mm.
What's the most important element of a business performance? It's about the people that deliver that
Yeah.
performance. And
And I
so,
suppose in terms of affecting levels of productivity, I mean, that brings me on to we've been talking about obviously athletes, and because you've worked with all sorts, from obviously as well as your football managers, you've worked with obviously top level footballers, cricketers, rugby players, people within the field of athletics.
correct.
But outside of that, you've also done a lot of work within the corporate world, but from sort of CEO level as well. So one of the things I was always fascinated by is the levels of stress that people who function on that sort of high level frequency of securing the next deal or chasing the next million, that they're always like there, as opposed to sort of many of us who are sort of, on this kind of a level as we sort of go via the day to day. But from whether it's they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to start training, and they've got that, is it the 5 a.m. millionaire mindset, that kind of thing. So how does that impact the heart? And have you seen a lot of negative impact to some of these people who are, high net worth individuals and CEOs?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Yes, I have. I mean, how does it impact the heart? Well, if you're stressed all the time and the levels of stress have increased significantly, your body starts to produce more adrenaline. And adrenaline is the fight or flight hormone, the chemistry that can really prepare you for an emergency.
Is it cortisol?
There's another one called cortisol. That's
Right.
different from adrenaline. So the adrenaline ramps up your heart rate, ramps up your blood pressure, tightens your circulation, particularly the sort of smaller elements of your circulation. And adrenaline is preparing you for fight or flight. The cortisol, the two little glands on top of the kidneys called the suprarenal glands, the cortisol has a different effect to a degree. It has a similar effect to adrenaline, but the other thing that cortisol does is it affects your immune function, and it
Right.
affects one particular branch of your white blood cells, your T lymphocytes, and they're some of the elements that fight off infection. So a classic is, you're at your desk, you're going on a holiday in 3 weeks' time, you're a top executive, you think, wow, I've got to make sure I'm going skiing for the next 10 days. So I've got to make sure my desk is clear. I've got to make sure everything's prepared so the business runs without me being there. And so what do? You work twice as hard, you work long hours. The minute you go away, what happens? Your immune function has dropped dramatically. You catch a bug, you
Is
catch a
that why it
virus.
happens?
It's one of the key reasons that influences you catching
Yeah.
a bug or an infection, in the first 2 or 3 days of your holiday. So there's some of the effects of stress. When we coach people, we use a thing called the emotional landscape, and we ask people to describe what happens to them when they're on the left-hand side of the landscape. They're highly stressed, things aren't going well, the business is being challenged, everything they touch isn't working out. We ask people to describe how they feel, and the sorts of things that come out from top leaders when we ask them that are they feel anxious, they feel irritable, they feel frustrated, they feel over challenged, they're out of control. Then I ask people, so, tell me a little bit more, what about your sense of humor? Haven't got one,
Uh,
is the usual reply. Then, what about facial expressions? Do you smile? No, frown.
they actually tell you this.
Oh, yeah, they tell me that. Yeah, straightforward. And then I'll say, well, how do you feel when you go home after a day like that? And they say, oh, well, I need a drink. That's the first thing that comes out of the mouth very often. I need a drink, and then another drink just to drown my sorrows. I'd like to, I'm
And
so
what, like decompress from the day?
socially isolated, don't want to talk to anybody. And that very often is on the stress side of the emotional landscape. On the other side of the emotional landscape, I paint a picture and say, well, listen, today is absolutely fabulous. Anything you touch turns to gold.
Hmm.
You're having a winning day. How do you feel? And they say, euphoric, fully engaged. That's a big one.
Hmm.
That's one of the key things. Sunday Times best companies measure the engagement.
Right.
Tell me about your facial expressions, smiling, sense of humor. Yeah, I've got one today. I've got lots of happiness inside me. And when I go home at night after a day like that, I'm buzzing. That's the key word that comes out. I want to share my success and the great day I've had with, my partner, my family, the people that are close to me. Completely different scenario. Look at those two scenarios. What's the chemistry of the first one? The stressed one.
Mm.
It's adrenaline, cortisol, a thing called interleukin 6 that it can damage your health and well-being, particularly your heart.
Yeah.
What's the chemistry of the other one? The one where you've been a winner, everything's going well, you're having a great day, endorphins. The DHEA, the anti-aging chemical, serotonin, the brain connector, oxytocin, the love chemical. All of those things are the endorphin type reactions that happen when you're having a great day.
Mm.
Which is the best one to live in? The one I've just explained, when you're having a great day. Do we all have to live in the other side of the emotional? Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
But having that balance is very, very important. And balance is a key thing that will relate to, happiness. I can tell you some great stories about situations that I've come across. I'll tell you one really fabulous story.
Yep.
For a number of years before COVID came along, I used to do a speaking tour to top executive groups in Australia and New Zealand. And one day I was going along to a very, very famous business, a big bank. And I was reading the front page of the Sydney Morning Tribune. And on the second half of the paper, there was a title, Lifestyle and Chief Executives. I thought, wow, I'm just going to speak to a bank and their chief executive and top directors. I can't believe I'm seeing this on the front page. And it read along the lines of this chief executive would go to work early in the morning, so he'd miss his children. He'd spend long hours at work. He'd come back late at night, and his children were ready for bed, so he didn't have much time. He walked in tired, drained, exhausted, frustrated from the day. His youngest little daughter would run up to him to give him a hug, and he said, "I haven't got time to give you a hug. Daddy needs a drink." And she'd run to her mummy. His older daughter said, "Daddy, could you help me with my homework?" He said, "Ask your mother. Daddy's had a tough day. Daddy's got a really responsible, pressurized job. Ask your mother," as he went and poured himself a stiff scotch and then another one. A few weeks later, he came home. This is a true story. It's on the front page of the Sydney Morning Tribune. No wife, no kids. So he shouts in an angry tone, "Where the hell is everybody?" And his wife says, "We're upstairs." He finds his kids under the duvet and his youngest under the bed. And he shouts in an angry tone, what are you doing under there?" And the little youngest looks up at him and says, "Daddy, we're frightened of you." His wife came out and said, "Can you see what you're doing to this family? Is it really worth it?" He did something quite dramatic. He had a beautiful garage, electronic doors. He built a door from the garage into the downstairs shower room. And from then on, when he came home, he got out of his business suit, came home earlier, put on some relaxing music, put on his sweats, came out and greeted the family with some love and affection. Revolutionized his lifestyle, changed his marriage. Incredible. So I read this story to the board that I was going to speak. I was giving them a 3 or 4 hour workshop on health and well-being for leaders.
I bet there was a lot of people in there that could relate to it.
You're not going to believe the story I'm going to tell you. The chief executive of the bank stood up and said, "I'm familiar with that story because I wrote it. It's me."
Really?
Now, I couldn't invent that, could I? He then, from then on, within the bank, would go home after, I think, 5 or 5:30 at night and ask people why they were still there. And if they needed to be there, of course, he fully understood.
Yeah.
But he encouraged people to have a life that counterbalanced any pressurized work in the bank. Isn't that a great story?
Yeah.
And so it's just.
Well, I mean, the thing. I mean, I know a lot of people that have done very, very well for themselves in life, but it's sometimes it's almost sad to see and that's one of the questions, because I've got my key questions as well for you. But in terms of what sacrifices are people prepared to make? Because people can look on the outside and think, oh, that person's got a great life. They've got loads of money. They've got everything. They've got the big house. They've got the cars. They've got, the full bank accounts. But some of the sacrifices that they've made to get to that level, and how detrimental it can be, like you said, to the personal relationships along the way. So that's why sort of one of the questions. In fact, I may as well ask the question now. One of them was a case of what are your key factors for you, do you think, that contribute to happiness? Because obviously some measure it by their relationships, some measure it by wealth or money, or what fancy watch they're able to buy, or their levels of success in business. So what do you consider to be some of the key factors when it comes to happiness?
I think a key word that comes straight to mind is balance.
Right.
It's being able to, offset the challenges and the aspirations to be successful against the other side of the fence that's about you, your health, your relationships with your family, your partners, the people that matter to you. And I think both sides of that fence are very, very important. Hence me talking about the emotional landscape earlier. It's so easy to slip onto the powerful side, the achievement side, and forget some of the other things that are so important. There's a lovely statement about, haven't seen too many people with an epitaph that says, "I wish I'd spent more time at work."
Yeah.
It's
true though.
But it is.
Yeah.
It is true. And I can tell you something about leaders. In fact, I can tell you another famous story about a very well-known leader. And he was in charge of one of the world's, and I can tell you this story because it's published, one of the world's largest credit card machine companies around the world,
Mm.
and a big company. I was actually speaking to his top directors at Lord's, where I've actually just been with all the cricket. But in the long room at Lord's, we were having a presentation on the corporate athlete and how you looked after yourself. And so he introduced me to his group, and he had a sort of a bizarre sense of humor, shall we say. And he said, "Oh, this is Dr. Death. He's going to speak to you." I said, "Oh, thanks very much for that introduction." So chatted away. At the end of the presentation, a couple of hours later, he came up to him and said, "Dorian," he said, I need to speak to you. He said, "I listened to you speak 3 years ago." He said, "It changed my life." He said, "I've since run a couple of marathons. I've really tried to listen to a lot of the messages that you brought across." He said, "But just recently, I find when I run that I get a real tightness in my chest and I can't breathe. And after about 2 miles, it goes away and I'm fine." I said, "That isn't normal."
Right.
I said, "I've actually got a cardiac clinic, a testing clinic down here in Canary Wharf. Why don't you come and see me tomorrow and I'll have a look at you?" So we did.
Mm.
After 3 minutes, I took him off the treadmill. I'd seen some significant changes.
What is this, when they're kitted up and they have to run and they've got all the...
There, he had a mouthpiece on, he had electrocardiograms all over his chest, and I could see something wrong with his ECG that was quite significant. And I said, "Look, this isn't right." I referred him to a cardiologist that I work very closely with. Cut a long story short, 3 weeks later, he had quintuple 5 coronary artery bypasses. 5. 3 of
So
the
my
main
dad had a
branches.
double.
Yeah, well, he had 5.
5 of them.
3 of the main branches and 2 of the subsidiary branches. So he was one of the fastest recoveries I've ever seen. 3 weeks later, he'd recovered really, really well. And a few weeks after that, he was back in his work, and, he did phenomenally well. But here's the interesting thing. I didn't hear from him again for 10 years.
What, at all?
At all. And then 10 years later, I have an email. He's now the chief executive of probably the largest bank in the world.
Right.
And he wrote to me and he said, "I want to say thank you for saving my life."
10 years later?
10 years later. And I said, "That's true. Thank you so much for writing to me." And we engaged in a conversation. He said, "Let me tell you something about leaders." He said, "We are so driven by success that if we have a weakness in ourselves, sometimes we find it hard to accept that weakness because it's a reflection on ourselves. And wrongly, we think that, we don't want people to know. We just can't accept that happening." So 10 years later, he then got in touch and said, "Thank you for saving my life." He's published in a book that's been written, and he's not the first person at a very, very top level that have got that approach. It's happened to a number of people. It's as if...
Is it a pride thing, or...?
I think it's a reflection of weakness. Pride may be a part of it. It's a reflection of they found a chink in my armor. It's quite amazing. The psychology of something like that is actually quite amazing. So back to your original question, hence me saying balance. There's a great song, you'll know it. It's called The Greatest, and it's sung by George Benson, and it's the Muhammad Ali theme song.
Love a bit of George.
Well,
one of my favourite boxers as well, Muhammad Ali, so I like that combo.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure you've played it on some of your shows and the work that you've done, but if you listen to the words of that song, there's one very, very poignant statement, and it says in the song, "The greatest love of all is actually being able to love yourself." And unless you can be at peace, or it's reflecting whether if you can be at peace with yourself, then you need to be there first before you can show that to anybody else.
And so
when I say the word balance, I think that's so important.
So what's your definition of happiness then? And would you say that how has it evolved over the years?
Well, my first element or definition of happiness would be at peace with yourself, being satisfied with yourself as a person, your flaws, your attributes, your ability to be at peace.
Okay.
I think that would be a key part of happiness. There's a lot of research now about happiness. You can walk into any big bookstore and you'll see loads of books on the happiness factor. It's quite interesting when you look at happiness. The happiness curve is interesting. I don't know if you've come across that, but there's a lot of research that's looked at stages in your life and when you're at your happiest.
Okay, interesting.
And I very often, when I present, talk about the 4 stages of happiness. And the first stage is in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And what sort of characteristics are there around happiness in childhood? Well, it's a time of exploration.
Yeah.
It's a time of no responsibility very often. It's a time of joy. It's a time
Out
of
playing with your mates and
discovery.
Yeah.
It's all, and they're very, very generally, not always, but generally, they're very, very happy times. Then there's a period called adolescence.
Mm.
That can be a great time. It could also be a time of challenge.
Yeah.
A time of, fast maturation. In the world of sport, there's always an adage that very often is shared, good big and albeit a good little un, until the good little un matures a little bit later maybe, and then things change. And so, and today's world, with some of the challenges that young people have, the peer pressure, and dare I say it, the big influence of social media, then it can actually be the making or the demise of people in that period of life. And then there's, what should we call it? The more adult years. Some people would call it the middle years.
Yeah.
I won't say middle age because age is just a misnomer in many aspects of physicality and maturation. But those middle years, there's a thing called mortgages. There's a thing called family responsibilities. There's a thing called
life in general.
Yeah, there is. There's a thing called aspiration.
Yeah.
I need to be the best. So that sort of comparison with your peers. The bigger car, the best watch, all the things you said a little bit earlier. And then there's, what shall we call them? The senior years, the years where you've begun to accept your lot. Not always, but there's a balance there. There's, I'm not going to be the next president or, the next female leader of whatever in the business world, the fashion world. And I'm at peace with myself. I'm proud of some of the things that I've done. I'm not so proud of some of the others. And, there's a period of acceptance. And those years very often are some of the best years. So what does the research tell you? An inverted U. The happiest years are childhood and the senior years, and the years in the middle.
It's like a horseshoe.
Yeah, it's the challenging years. And then you look at different countries, and we're pretty good actually.
Where do I need to move to?
Well, all the research.
Where are we going?
All the research tells you the Scandinavian countries are right up there.
Right.
Sweden, Finland. Finland had some of the major heart problems years ago. Denmark, Norway. Well, people would say, well, but don't they have problems with, it's dark a lot of the year round. The social structure, the way in which they approach work in many instances is very different.
Right.
And so they're right up there. They're right at the top of the tree. So it's quite interesting when you look at the happiness U-shaped curve. So it's fascinating but the balance aspect that I mentioned earlier, and being at peace with yourself. And there's a great new book that's just been written. Has it just been written? Yeah, it has. It's recent. It's called The Blue Zone. Have you heard of it?
No.
The Blue Zone, I think the author is Butner. And he spent a long time traveling the world looking at the longest living populations. And there was a TV program. Jon Snow was the guy that was the presenter on the program.
Yeah.
Went to a place called Ikaria in the Greek islands and looked at the lifestyle that they had. And of course, sunshine, vitamin D,
Yeah.
no flashy buildings or designs, but a very natural way of life. Their foods were the Mediterranean style
Yeah.
diet. Their social structure was one of connectedness. Their environment was lovely. It wasn't expensive, but it was just a beautiful place. Even the wines and things, the foods they made were plant-based, grown from the earth, and all these sorts of things. That's Ikaria. Then he went and he looked at the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda in California. And whether you support their religion or whether you don't, on Sundays, their social structure, they all got together as friends and as families, and wherever they came from in terms of professional walks of life, they shared the camaraderie of being together. Big plus. And then he looked at places like Okinawa in Japan.
Yeah.
And how they look after their elder
Yeah.
people and the strength of the family and what that meant. And so the Blue Zone is about places. I think there are 7 different places around the world that he visited. This is Butner, and said there are some messages from these places on how you benefit your health by the way in which you live and the way in which you structure your lives. It's a very good book.
I'll check that out. You've seen, well, I'll show you again. I've added some more to my collection, but I do like a good read, so I'll have to.
You'll love this one.
I'll have to check that one out.
And it's a lovely coffee table book as well, so you'll enjoy having that at home and people coming to share your coffee.
On my coffee table at the minute, I've got Manifest. That's so yeah. You can have a look at that in a bit. But you mentioned as well within that diet, which is one of the things I was going to say, because obviously as well as the physical side of things when it comes to the heart, how important is our diet?
Crucial. I mean, diet is we are what we eat.
Yeah.
And so what you put into your body will affect your energy production. It will affect the health of things like your arteries. I mean, one of the biggest problems now facing the world is in developed countries is one of obesity, and particularly visceral fat. The fat around the middle of your body is a major problem. And so, if you said to me, summarize the best types of diet that you could really follow, it would be a Mediterranean type diet.
Right.
Plant-based foods that were grown naturally and organically. That's the best sort of diet to follow. If you look at foods that are natural, just simple guidelines, the deeper the color, the better very often. So if you look at some of the super fruits, you're looking at blueberries, you're looking at kiwi fruits, you're looking at strawberries, you're looking at pomegranate. And it's interesting, some of the things about pomegranate, the antioxidant value of those things that actually protect you against free radical damage in your body is in actually the pith of the seeds of the fruit as opposed to the juice of the fruit. So it's quite interesting when you look at fruits. Then you look at vegetables. Look at some of the superfoods in vegetables. You're looking at, kale and baby spinach and the beetroot, and the deeper the color, very often the more the antioxidant value. Oxygen travels around your body. How can I explain? Like a couple holding hands. it's bonded, and when the bond gets broken, you
Mm.
get a free radical. And free radicals are if you like, the molecular outlaws, the villains that can destroy a lot of your cells. And
Right.
so that diet, that Mediterranean style diet, is important. If you look at the foods now that we can very often have, you look at some of the chemicals that are put into the soil.
Yeah.
They can destroy the foods that we've had. It's quite amazing. One of the interesting ones I always sort of cite to people: you go to Italy and certain sections of Spain and Argentina, and get a tomato and taste the tomato when you're there, and you come back sometimes here and you taste the tomato is completely different. Why is that? It's because the way in which
They've been grown.
yeah, and in a more natural soil that is
Like a more organic kind of environment.
organic, avoid of all the sort of chemicals and phytochemicals that are put into the soil that can damage the foods that we eat and destroy their vitamins and minerals that are essential to our health and well-being. So it's so important.
Someone introduced me a while back to alkaline water. And how important it is for the alkaline or your body to be more, I think, is it 9 times out of 10 is more acidic and it should be more alkaline. But they sort of did this little experiment with some tomatoes, funnily enough, that they bought from just a local supermarket, and they said, right, okay, 2 sets of tomatoes. Here's just some tomatoes that are washed in your normal, let's say, tap water. I left it to soak. Here's the tomatoes, and it was literally packets right in front of my eyes, came from the same packet, and they put it in the alkaline water. And so we had a chat, left it for about 5-10 minutes, and they said, right, now taste the tomatoes. Once it had the chance to sort of strip off all the pesticides and whatever it was that had been on there, and the difference in flavour between the two of them. Had I not seen them, like I said, open this packet in front of me, I thought, yeah, okay, where did you get this second lot of tomatoes from? But it was just phenomenal that there was so much more flavour to these tomatoes that had been in the alkaline water as opposed to the normal tap water. And it was just, that's one of the things that made me think, I need to start looking at this sort of alkaline water as a bit of an option, because I couldn't believe it until I tasted it for myself. It was incredible.
That's right. I mean, I have a friend, a colleague, who's an expert in looking at water, and he can look at the vibrations in water, and by shining a light on those on the water, it can change the consistency of the water. It's called structured water. I'm not an expert in it at all, but the difference it makes is quite phenomenal. It's all about the vibrations that go through our daily living,
and is it more hydrogenated, I think, as well with the alkaline water?
Correct.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah. So I mean, it's quite amazing, really. And I mean, most of our bodies are dehydrated, and so we don't drink enough water. And basically, if you look at your blood, it's 70-80% water. Your brain's actually 70-odd%, 80% water.
Really?
Yeah. So being hydrated
Is it really?
being hydrated. A friend of mine is
hence why you get a headache when you're dehydrated.
Yeah,
that's
correct.
one of the first things that you feel. Right?
Yeah. A friend of mine's a neuroscientist, and saying it's very, very important to drink water, and so the whole area of nutrition and diet and hydration is an area we could talk about for.
Well, now I'm going to get you back on at some stage, but just to come to some of my other couple of questions. When it comes to adversity, then, how do you approach, or how should people approach overcoming adversity? And how has some of the circumstances that you've been through in life, how has that changed your perspective on it?
Adversity is a really interesting question. I think, again, the word balance comes to mind in terms of looking at adversity and trying to overcome it. And I think being true to yourself is probably one of the major things that you have to be to deal with adversity. I'll tell you a great story that relates to myself. I was at college, and I was doing my degrees. I think I've think we've been to the college I was at together,
Yeah.
and I was the first person at that college to get a Bachelor of Education degree in education and physical education. And there were 5 of us on the course that made the 4th year of that degree. And we had to qualify from the 3rd year to the 4th year. And when the results came out, 3 of us had a surname beginning with D.
Mm.
And when the results came out, I was told I hadn't made it, and that I wasn't. Unfortunately, it wasn't me.
Mm.
There's only one person that had qualified, and it was to get on to the 4th year. Unfortunately, it wasn't me. And I remember going down to the playing fields outside the college and sitting on a tree trunk and putting my hands together and thinking, well, you know, I'm going to have to look at life. I got my dream of going on a scholarship to the United States, and that was all going to disappear into a puff of smoke now. And I had to sort of try and deal with the fact. And I just looked at myself and thought, well, balance-wise, look at me. I'm a healthy guy. I'm in good shape. I've got a career I could make in a professional sport. I've got great parents. There are lots of things that I need to be thankful for and appreciate. And okay, so I tried and I didn't make it. But look at what is good in my life in comparison to what isn't good in my life. And I came to a piece of peace with myself. And when I'd done that, and I was tearful, when I was sitting on the tree trunk, I was tearful. And I walked back into the college. And as I was walking out of the college, being at peace with myself, the vice principal tapped the window and said, "Dorian, can you come in, please?" And I went in. And he said, "You look upset." I said, "Yeah, but I'm fine." And he said, "Well, there's been a terrible mistake." He said, "It was actually you that qualified."
Oh, wow.
And one of the other students beginning with a surname of D didn't. And I thought,
let it go, let it flow.
How fragile is that wonderful word success? And, sometimes you can be on the top of the clouds and other times you can be down in the depth. But what is balance and adversity? It's somewhere in the middle, isn't it? And so that's my approach to, the bottom line is being true to yourself, you as a person.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I would try and deal with adversity.
So as we come to a bit of a close, then how important do you consider maintaining your well-being and overall self-care to be?
Out of 10, 11.
Really?
I think it's critical. I mean, I think, looking after your own health and well-being is absolutely vital to get the best quality out of your own life, to influence others so that they have the same pride in themselves and their approach to looking after themselves. I think it's absolutely critical. I did a presentation recently for a major financial house, very switched on company. And one of the daughter of the owner actually works for me.
Right.
And Olivia. And the title of the presentation was Health is Wealth. And so
I'm always hashtagging health is wealth. Anytime I put up any posts, 100%.
And so I spoke to 70 very successful business people.
Yeah.
Very successful. And I said, well, that success is only there to be enjoyed if you've got the other side of the fence to go with it, and that's your own health, your own well-being. And that's about 4 things. It's about your physical health, which is very important. So the shape you're in, your cardio fitness, your muscularity, your anatomical fitness, that's important. Yeah, of course it is. And things that affect it, things like your sleep and things like your nutrition, the things that we've talked about, Nat. But then you've got your emotional health. And that's, where you sit in terms of your own personal well-being mentally. the balance you've got there. And that is critically important. And that reflects things like forgiveness, being if people have upset you and, hanging on to it
Yeah, doesn't do
will
you any good.
devastate you,
Yeah.
your health. So that's important. Then there's your own personal well-being from a spirituality point of view. That is not religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what you do outside of work and family, what you do for yourself,
Yeah.
the things that you actually do. And one of the to illustrate that, one of the things that I have started to do regularly is I've been lucky in my career and I've been relatively successful. And the people that have influenced me on the way, many of them I've lost touch with.
Right.
One of the things I try to do now is reconnect with some of those people.
Yeah.
And the buzz and the euphoria that has generated in me as a person is phenomenal. I can't put it into words. And when you do that,
Yeah.
then people love the fact that you've recognized how important they have been in your life, despite whatever success you've had. And the final area in terms of my own personal health and well-being is risk, is looking at, if you can, neutralizing risk that can lead to the diseases that we all know can, cut life short prematurely in people, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, a lot of the big things that can impact on people's lives before they should do.
Yeah.
And so knowing your risk numbers, and we have a program called Know Your Numbers.
I was going to come to that because I've had the Know Your Numbers test before. I'm not going to lie, at some stage, I would love to go on the machine and get pushed properly and have Liam come down and film it, because that would be fascinating to go through like the whole process. Because I think as well, people who are going to be tuning in and be just as fascinated as I am by what you've had to say today, but to see you in action and the process that you put people through to get to that level of finding out, are you fit or is there something wrong? Then I want to get on the treadmill. I'm just saying that. I'm going to regret saying that, I'm sure, but yeah.
No, it'd be a pleasure. And an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of treatment.
Yeah. But knowing your numbers, we're talking now as well. This is things like your cholesterol and all the things that people probably don't necessarily take as much notice of as what they should.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, it's one thing to have your numbers measured, but it's another thing to understand what they mean. And so it's fine to get things measured, but I think one of the reasons we've been successful corporately in the sporting world when we've delivered these programs is that alongside with doing the measurements, we take the time to explain what they mean and to coach people on how to change them if they need to change them, and to congratulate people if they're doing well.
Yeah.
So there's two sides of the coin, but that's such an important approach to take. And I'll finish with a great story that I use. I speak to a lot to big corporations and big audiences. And one of the things I'll do, especially if they're business people, is I'll ask them to stand up. And so imagine a hall of 500 people and they're standing up, and I'll say, okay, if you don't know your key performance indicators for your business and the profit and loss of your business, I'd like you to sit down. And of course, virtually all of them remain standing. And I laugh and joke and say, you didn't sit down really, had you? And have some fun. And then I say, okay, if you don't know that aspect of your cholesterol that's called HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, the one that
is that your avocados?
Yeah, the one that you should probably know more of. You should have more of. If you don't know, and I'm not talking about your total cholesterol, but there are 5 numbers you should know. If you don't know your HDL good cholesterol, please sit down. 90% of the audience invariably sit down.
Really?
And I'll say, that's interesting. You know all about your business numbers, but when I've asked you one question about the key health number, 90% of you have sat down. Is the balance right? Going back to the word balance that we talked about earlier. There we go.
So, and when you have gone in, because obviously we were speaking earlier on, when you go into the sort of the corporate world, you CEOs bring you in and you're dealing with staff on all different levels within a company. just to reiterate as well, these numbers and everything, these are the kind of things that you're also doing with a lot of these members of staff.
Yeah, we do that. We measure in a total workforce. We measure all of them, and we also measure health behaviour. There's there's a model called readiness to change, and there are 6 components of being ready to change. Let's take exercise.
Yeah.
The first component is called a pre-contemplator. That's a person that when they feel the need for exercise coming on, they lie down till it goes away. That's a pre-contemplator.
Right. Okay.
They're not thinking about doing it. They have no intention.
Right.
Then we have another category called a contemplator.
Right.
Somebody who's thinking about it. Yeah, exercise is probably a good thing one of these days. I'll do it one of these days. Then we have another stage called preparation.
Okay.
And that's the person that, they've just bought the most expensive tracksuit. They've got these amazing trainers.
Right.
They've joined the gym on January the 1st. They've put their bike in the bedroom.
Right.
They're still hanging their clothes on it. They're not.
That's my mom. That's actually the treadmill is a hanger for her. Some of her stage clothes. There we go.
So that's
sorry, Mom.
That's preparation. Now, the next stage is called action. I've been exercising for 2 or 3 hours a week for the last 3 to 6 months. The next stage is called maintenance. I've been doing it for 6 to 12 months. It's becoming very regular.
Mm-hmm.
And the final stage is termination. That doesn't mean you've popped your clogs, but it means I've been doing it for 5 years and it's a lifestyle thing, like
It's
cleaning
part
my
of your
teeth.
daily routine.
Guess what? If you're a pre-contemplator and contemplator, motivation isn't what you need. It's education. It's explain to people why they need to exercise and the pluses and minuses.
Right.
When you get them to preparation, they've got the tracksuit, they've got the trainers, then it's motivation.
Right.
And then during action, maintenance and termination, they can hit roadblocks, but it's continued motivation and it's a thing that's called congratulate yourself as you're actually improving. That's important. So celebration is the key area there. So we measure that as well.
Right.
So it's not just about the numbers, which is the profit and loss of your health and well-being, but it's about the behaviors that underpin those numbers that can then make a difference. And the people that work with me and for me are skilled at coaching people to move from things like contemplation into eventually into action. And that is the real skill and technique. So we do that when we go into companies.
And I said earlier as well that this, because I know that this is something that has a huge impact on overall productivity. Of if your staff are happy and they're going to be more productive, then for these sort of CEOs and everything, it's that ripple effect that it ends up benefiting everybody. And again, there's going to probably be CEOs and business owners that are watching today thinking, do you know what? I didn't even think about this for my business. And I know that because you've got, verified testimonials from people that have said that it's helped to change not just them as individuals, but them as a company.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think a lot of we've worked with a variety of companies, and groups in the sporting world, as you well know, the world of football. We've worked with the managers for 15 years, the world of sport across the board, but also with companies like Causeway. Causeway, a building IT solutions company. They won some major awards for having some of the best wellness programs for their employees. And we developed some concepts for them that just engaged people that sat behind desks most of the day to be engaged in physical activity, to change their nutrition, to communicate more effectively with colleagues. It's amazing with the development of IT and social media. One of the things that people very often fail to do effectively and not realize how important it is to communicate with other people in the workplace. And that is critically important. And if you look at places like Silicon Valley, mega millions are being made there. Their ability to socialize and interact with other people sometimes is very, very challenging. Look at COVID. One of the things that people missed in COVID, they thought, oh, it's great. I can, as long as I can avoid COVID, I can stay at home and I can work. But one of the
connection.
things that, yes,
Yeah.
and it's about connectedness.
Mm-hmm.
It's about interacting with other people. And that's a huge part of wellness and well-being and health.
Last question for you. It might even be the one you mentioned earlier, or you might have a different one up your sleeve. But what is your go-to song? If there's a song that instantly lifts your spirits, or if you're thinking, do you know what, I just need something to just give me that little boost today. What's your go-to?
I love That's Life by Tony Bennett.
Okay.
Because
Interesting that you went with Tony and not Frank.
Yeah, I know. Everybody goes my way.
Yeah.
But actually, no. I mean, it's That's Life by Tony Bennett. I just love, because if you listen to the words, it talks about, there's uppers and there's downers and there's, success and there's failure. But, that's life.
Yeah.
And you've got to treat all of those imposters with the same breath of fresh air that takes you through life. So if you ask me, that's what it would be.
I think that is a great song choice. Loving that, because I'm going to be sort of putting together as all the different guests that come on. There's going to be a nice little playlist that I'm going to put together that people will be able to go and obviously have a listen to. So I think to be able to mix up the genres, but again, Tony Bennett, a legend himself as well, bless him. But Dorian, I knew you'd be a good one to have on. Are you going to send some of your incredible friends my way as well? Because obviously You've spoken about some fantastic people. And again, I know that there's going to be people listening that even when it comes to things like water, all these simple subjects, but that you can go on to just expand on for so long, and that people can sort of learn from along the way, then send some of your people my way. But
be a pleasure, and it's been a privilege chatting to you and having the opportunity to share not just our friendship, but to share some of the insights you've got about health and well-being, which is great as well.
No, well, like I said, I always appreciate you at the best of times, and hopefully as well that there's going to be some people who have been listening or watching today that will have been able to take some snippets. And like I said, there might be even someone in the corporate world thinking, right, let's get Dorian in then and up our productivity. But like I said, love you to pieces. Really, really appreciate you coming on today. So thank you for joining me for episode 2 of Nattabox.
Love you too, and look forward to listening to your future celebrities, whoever they are, that you get on here, and I'm sure they'll enjoy speaking to you just like I have. Thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate it. We've got some good ones coming up. So once again, that's it from me for this episode, and see you next time on the Nattabox podcast.